Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to BoardStrong's Treasurers Roundtable. I'm Barbara Paxton, the director of BoardStrong. For those of you who are just meeting us, we're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to strengthen the governance of nonprofit boards of directors. We provide nonprofit board recruitment and placement, training, and consultation. Our online board recruitment platform connects organizations to talented and diverse board candidates from outside of their networks. So you've seen this roundtable will be recorded. You should receive the recording in a few days. We're going to take questions at the end, so please use the chat box for any questions you have for the panelists. And let's get started. Board members are the fiduciaries of their organizations who must steer their organizations towards a sustainable future by adopting sound ethical and legal governance and financial management policies, as well as making sure the nonprofit has adequate resources to advance its mission. The board's treasurer is critical to guiding the board in doing this. Today, we are honored to be joined by a group of experienced board treasurers who will share with us their insights and give us some guidance on the performance of this important role. Our moderator is David Rottkamp, who is the treasurer of the BoardStrong board and the nonprofit practice leader at Grassi, a national advisory tax and accounting firm. He is joined by panelists John Alfonso, Pat Johnson, and Gena Lovett. Over to you, David.
Barbara, thank you very much, and good day, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to BoardStrong's annual Treasurer Roundtable. I'm thrilled to be sitting here alongside Pat, John, and Gena, three esteemed panelists, as we share thoughts, ideas, and have a conversation around the role of a board treasurer in a nonprofit organization. I have the pleasure of leading Grassi's national nonprofit and healthcare practice, and with that role, I have the opportunity to work with so many amazing organizations and great people across this country who serve the nonprofit sector, working with employees, working with board members as well. Very rewarding and very exciting opportunity over the 36 years that I've been able to serve the nonprofit community. With me today, we'll start with, as my boxes go around, Pat Johnson. Pat is the past treasurer and fellow colleague board member of mine on the New York Council of Nonprofits. Pat, great to have you here. Thank you. She's also the former treasurer of the ARC of Erie County of New York and currently serves, or has currently served, as the president of the State Society's Foundation for Accounting Education as well. An established long career serving the nonprofit sector. Gena Lovett, thank you, Gena, for joining us today as well. Gena is a strategic thinker and natural problem solver. I love the way that is out there, Gena, up on one of the bios that I've got a chance to see, and is dedicated to developing the potential of women and minorities. Gena is founder and managing member of Little Wolf Capital and Consulting in the financial services world, and before that was a COO and principal of the Alexandra Investment Management Organization. A long distinguished career in that area of financial services, but also is a well-renowned volunteer board member, and most recently is sitting as the treasurer of the Association of the Junior Leagues International. And our last panelist is John Alfonso. John is the practice leader of CohnReznick's and not-for-profit and higher education practice. John also has had a long, distinguished career similar to mine. We're kind of the old timers in our group now. John started his career in the mid-'80s, has been at CohnReznick in his role for 22 years. John also has a significant amount of volunteerism in his career as past board chair and officer of the American Cancer Society and currently treasurer of the Spain U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So with that, the three of you, please, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for joining us today. And let's kick us off and get started. Gena, why don't you talk about a little bit about your career and about your volunteerism and why you do what you do and what makes it so important to you?
Wow, that's a loaded question, David. So early in the day. Well, I've had a long, I've been in financial services for over 20 years, starting off in the back offices of Payne Weber, if any of you all actually remember them, and kind of fast forwarding, after, going from back to middle to front and ending up as a hedge fund as the COO and a partner, running the day-to-day operations. And at the same time, all of this time that I have been in the corporate world, I've taken that experience and actually brought that back to, not-for-profit, being in a longstanding member of the New York City Junior League, a former treasurer and president. My skills are kind of cross-pollinated. So I've been able to integrate them, in the day-to-day as a part of the day-to-day, and also, in my work in a non-for-profit. So now I'm the current treasurer as, AJ Alive, which is a position that you are selected by the membership. So totally excited about bringing new ideas and things to the organization. So
Wonderful. Thank you, Gena, for that. Pat, how about yourself?
I started my career in public accounting a long time ago, and then transitioned over to industry for a while, including a nonprofit theater in the area. I'm in the Buffalo, New York area, and then did probably close to 30 years of higher ed, and that has been rewarding in being able to share the nonprofit importance of nonprofits, the need, and do some service learning actually with students to get engaged in that area. I still do a little bit of practice on the side of keeping, because I've always felt it's hard to teach if you're not current in everything, and bring some of that to the table. So I'm sort of transitioning into a part-time mode now, and been volunteering, and that's been a really important piece to me, both in the not-for-profit sector and also in some of the professional organizations. And I think, David, you and I came on the NYCON board together.
You did.
So it's been a great experience, and hopefully the skills that all of us have in our accounting roles are needed and appreciated, and have helped those organizations to move along.
Thank you, Pat. It's been a pleasure serving with you on the NYCON board and watching you educate and shape the young minds of the future who are going to work in the nonprofit space someday. So thank you for that. John, thanks for being here as well. Maybe you spend a moment or two talking about yourself.
Hey, David, thank you very much for the invitation. I always appreciate being with you. You're one of the good guys in this business. I appreciate what you do. Gena and Pat and Barbara, delighted to meet you as well and be here and be a part of this panel. And yeah, as David pointed out, very involved in the sector myself, and a privilege to lead the not-for-profit practice for CohnReznick. I've been in this, I'm definitely an old timer. I'd like to consider myself more vintage, right? As a vintage timer.
I say tenured, not vintage, but I got you.
Yeah. So about 40 years of serving mostly tax-exempt organizations. And, you realize that when you do that long enough, I mean, really, you need to be on the other side of the table as well. And I've started volunteering, arguably for the wrong reasons early on, to make connections in the community that I worked in and lived in. And then pretty quickly you realize that there are causes out there that are far more important than my career. Yeah. And that really isn't like some canned speech. It's the truth. You realize it. You have this epiphany, if you will, that your time and talent could also be devoted to helping others in need. And there are a lot of people in need in our communities. So it's been a privilege of mine to volunteer with the American Cancer Society, with a number of other organizations, and serve in the treasurer role. And I'll end with this. I think you find out through volunteering that what you have received from that experience far exceeds what you've given to the charity. It can be very, very rewarding in many, many ways. So I'll flip it back to you, David.
Thank you, John, and amazing backgrounds professionally as well as from a level of volunteerism. I had the pleasure of also sitting on 5 boards myself and board chair of 2 of them, and been played, I think, officer roles in all of them as they currently sit in. Probably the biggest charity I work with is the National Multiple Sclerosis Society at both the local Greater New York City level, where I am current board chair, finishing up the 2nd term, over 16 years now, but also proud of my work at the national level, where I've been a board member for almost 12 years. And sharing some officer roles there as well. So it's great to give back, but it's really amazing to receive and to be able to provide and help those in need. So with all that being said, we're going to focus on finances though today. We can all talk about our board service and how great it is, and it really is great and rewarding. But let's focus on treasurer roles and what it means to be a successful treasurer in your meaning. So Pat, how about we start with you on that one? What do you think is the definition of a successful treasurer?
I think a successful treasurer needs to be a great communicator. I think we've all, realized that, and be able to persuade sometimes, or at least inform the board on the financial side of the house in a way that they can understand. And, we're sort of steeped in FASB pronouncements and all of that, but how do you get that out of the weeds and be able to explain what that means and help to run the organization in a financially accountable and correct way so that you can sustain the organization. So I guess credibility in some ways with the board, and understanding that we're not the naysayers all the time, but just the keeping people on the on the right track from the financial perspective, as well as helping them forward the mission.
Thank you, Pat. Gena, how about from yourself? How do you define a successful treasurer?
Well, just adding on to what Pat actually said, I think that being a good treasurer, you have to be creative. Being creative to be able to present the information to the board and being able for them to be able to understand. Just speak English. I mean, you kind of take the financials and the finance, language, and be able to kind of apply to your everyday life. I also think that, being financially literate, when you have a staff, you need to be able to understand, the financial systems and the reporting, attention to detail. I think I said creativity, and then also compliance as well, because, the laws are constantly changing and there are new things that you need to be aware of, as well as the staff and also the board as well. So it's a combination of those things.
And I think Gena, and to Pat's point as well, being able to communicate in a manner that your board members understand what's going on. It's not just a matter of reading numbers off of a page, but what does it mean to them, and how do we, as the role of a treasurer, share and impart that knowledge to our fellow board members to help them become more successful and carry out their fiduciary responsibilities. John, how about for yourself?
Yeah, I would only echo what all of you have said. I think you may want to go as far as calling it a translator as well, right? Of financial information, so that it is digestible to all members of the board. And if you have a good board, it's a diverse board. You have people with financial acumen, some with medical experience, some with other disciplines. Maybe they're environmental scientists, whatever your mission is. But I think it's important that they all understand things like what your budget is, where you're heading financially, what are the ups and downs of the financial cycles for the business. So I think that's very important. I think, of course, a treasurer should have certain traits going into the job. They should at least have a business background. They should have some experience. Some business acumen is a big help. Accounting is important, but there are treasurers that with their business experience can get by without necessarily knowing debits or credits. Again, not a proponent of that. And last but not least, I think a treasurer needs to be committed to the mission of the organization. They need to understand the organization and be very committed to it.
Thank you, John, for that. It's really important from a commitment perspective that the treasurer understand what the organization does, is able to digest the programmatic activities, the operational activities, and the administrative responsibilities that go on with the organization in order to truly understand what the numbers and the finances mean to the organization, to help guide and provide that high-level board oversight to the leadership team of the nonprofit. And as we go through our discussion over the next 35, 40 minutes or so, there are different sizes of organizations that are on our presentation today who are attending. Some are large organizations, 10, 20, 30, $40 million size organizations. And there are some that are $1 million to $500,000 in operating budget size. There's also organizations that have board members of 3 people and some have board members of 35 people. So, the treasurer role is not a one size fits all type of discussion. I think hopefully our conversation today will share some of the insights that all of us have around, bigger organization treasurers versus even smaller organization treasurers, and how the roles may actually vary a little bit based on the different types of organizations that you're working with. So Gena, let's go into the next question around relationships, because the treasurer certainly gets involved with the executive leadership team. At least they should be getting involved with the executive leadership team. And I define that as the CEO and let's say the CFO/controller. Can you maybe talk about what your relationship is like in your organization where you're the treasurer now, and how that works and how often you interface with them?
Well, I actually interface a lot with the staff now and the CEO. We've actually gone through a transition. We hired a new CEO actually last January. So she is now on her first year. So our financial staff, we actually outsourced to another organization, and we had one person that was within our organization as the finance person. So our outsourcing firm, we decided last year that we would go separate ways and then actually try to figure out what we needed as an organization, on a day-to-day. And then that said, we have that one person, and then we also have another person who is a fractional controller. And so I de facto was acting kind of, more so in a CFO role until the new CEO came on board. So now I interact with her not only just on the finance side, but also just as an organization on, what's going on, the differences and what is actually needed between the staff, and then also as the board representative. I think that's something that's very important that has to be also looked at and talked about as we go through, today, is that, you have staff, and then you also have, the board and being the board treasurer. So you have to know where your role begins and where it actually ends. And so therefore, sometimes it gets a little muddy, especially if you still don't have, you're still working on fulfilling those new staff members to add on board. So I get along very good with the CFO, and
That's
then
great.
also with the fractional controller as of now. So
your role certainly is a fluid role based on, of course, the existence and the experience of the employees that you're working with. So it's important to be able to show that there's a pivoting that you may have to do over time.
And also the other thing is too, it's a membership organization. So we have, 100,000 members. So we have 295 leagues. So I actually have 295 bosses that may have treasurers. So
oh my goodness,
it's kind of like, whether it's dues or whatever the case may be, going out, representing the organization, whether it's a training. So it's a job. But good. I love it. I love my members. They're great.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Thank you. John, how about yourself? How about in your treasurer role currently? What's your relationship like with your leadership team, and how often do you interact with them?
Yeah, so I kind of share with you the differences between a small organization and a large one. As I think, I've been a treasurer for the American Cancer Society for a number of years, no longer have that role. But for the Spain U.S. Chamber of Commerce, a much smaller organization, a membership organization, that role is, different. But I'll tell you, in both situations, there were times where I was on the phone with the executive director or the CFO, could have been daily for some periods of time, depending on a transaction or an issue that we were dealing with that just needed time. So I think it really does ebb and flow depending on the circumstance of an organization. But to me, I think the best role for a treasurer is that of oversight. A fellow director once shared with me the expression that, directors ought to have their noses in, but their hands out. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, right?
Yep.
You can't really govern if you're managing, because you're being sort of self-critical if you do that. But there's just times that, you have a CFO who leaves the organization, and it falls on the fiduciaries to step in and, re-level or, keep the boat afloat, if you will.
Yep.
So from a financial point of view. So I think it really does vary. I do think it's important, though, and critical that when there is a CFO, the treasurer have a very strong relationship with that CFO,
Yep.
a relationship
Agreed.
of trust, and a collaborative one where they feel comfortable exchanging ideas with one another.
Excellent points. Thank you for that, John. Pat, how about yourself? Especially when you were at, and it's different when you were at NYCON, probably when you were at ARC, Erie County as well, right?
Right. And, kind of piggybacking on what John said, one of the things that I learned, especially at the ARC, 3 CFOs were in and out by the, during my tenure. And the first one had been part of the recruitment process. We had a good relationship, very open. And I guess I didn't think about the need to sort of level set when the second person came in. He left and, had the organization, and it was a little harder to have that open relationship until we had the conversation. I have to ask these questions. I'm not, trying to put you on the spot kind of thing. And so, I made a specific point of doing that when the next CFO came in, and from the start, it was just a much, I think it was the relationship we should have had. And, the call me if you have an issue, we can talk about things, and, that open flow. And I think that's, NYCON, that's been true, pretty much all along. And I've tended to deal more with the CFO, not that the CEO wasn't available, but the CEO would be part of the, the meetings and so forth. And if there was anything we needed to talk about, certainly open. But I think getting that relationship of, you're there for oversight, but you're also there to help and, answer questions. And, the auditor's not always the place to take those questions. We're the internal resource. And, and on the ARC board, there was nobody else with an accounting background, very basic, it's a couple banking from the finance side. So it was, it was a bit of a challenge in the beginning just to get the, what's the right information that we should be sharing with the board. So working with the CFO was really, really important.
I would agree. It's really, the relationship primarily is driven through the CFO, in my opinion, as a treasurer. The CEO is there, executive director is there. There are times where interaction is necessary on major decisions. But I would agree, we are, as a volunteer, we have a fiduciary responsibility, duty of care, loyalty, and obedience, of course, but we're also a sounding board and a resource and someone who can help share experiences that we've seen across our careers to help the CFO and often the CEO manage the operations of the organization. So with that, Pat, I'm sure that in your roles when you were NYCON treasurer, I know internal financial statements are generated by the team, by the management team, the finance team. But talk about, did you present them to the board? Did you present them to finance committees? Were you involved in that process? Was it something that management did? How did that work for you? And then I'm going to ask the same question for Gena and John as well in their experiences.
Well, on NYCON, the CFO presented them to the finance committee, and we had the discussions there. And then usually the finance committee chair and the treasurer were 2 different people. So we shared the responsibility with the treasurer doing more of the heavy lifting. And I think it took a little while, but slowly to get out of the weeds and all the details, because we get very detailed reports there, and present more of a higher level, where the concerns are, where the the positives, the things that we might need to work more on, and again, in a way that the board would understand. And just sort of switching over to ARC, that was a much different setting. It took a while. The board, we had to re-engage them, I guess, in having some more interest in it, still trying to do that high level, but there it was more of a joint effort between the CFO and myself, as far as taking on different roles. And, that evolved and probably will continue to do so. So
But it sounds like collaboration, sounds like a level of trust has to be there if you're working that closely with the CFO and the CFO is presenting and you're the treasurer. So to answer the question, so
and
great
no,
point.
no surprises. I think that
Right,
was
and no, so and no,
have those
who likes
conversations
surprises?
ahead of time and
Absolutely.
make sure
Yep.
you're on the same page with that. So,
Right. So preparation time is important as well. It sounds like.
yes, yes.
Excellent, Sean. How about from your perspective?
Yeah, David, I would say for the American Cancer Society as an example, early on, I would do more of the talking in the boardroom than the CFO, and that changed. And I think it's a natural and correct progression that it's the CFO who should be
Right.
reporting to the board. And the treasurer's role is to make sure the board understands and highlights things that are particularly important so that the board knows what's on the focus of the treasurer. In a smaller organization, and I did this last night, the treasurer usually does the reporting. It's very typical of that. But in those cases, I think it's critical that there is collaboration beforehand with either the executive director or the CFO of an organization to make sure that you're all singing from the same hymn book, if you will. It's important that everyone's aligned on what the key performance indicators, the data is that is being shared with the board.
Alignment. It's a great word. I was going to suggest that's got to be there with the leadership team there. Gina, how about with yourself?
My experience has been a little bit different.
Okay.
Most of all the organizations that I've been treasurer of, I kind of end up making the presentation. I work very closely, with the CFO or the controller to go over the financial information. As far as like the reporting, I get the standard, financial statements, statement of position, activities, and also cash flow. We have with AGL Live, we have a stop date, the 10th of the month to make sure everything is reconciled and that all of the financial statements are sent to me. And then there's a treasurer's report that I also have for the board and also for the finance committee. So that treasurer's report actually details, really, it's a summary of the statement of all of the financial statements. And we meet once a month with our finance committee. Finance committee goes over all the details. Everybody gets it in advance. So therefore you can have your questions ready. And then after we meet, if there are any changes, then staff will actually make those changes. And they also attend the finance committee meetings as well. So if there are questions that we don't understand or I don't know, then they can answer those questions. The CEO also attends those meetings as well, because she is part of the staff and she's also overseeing it and she wants to know what's actually going on. And then the next step is to go into the board packet. The treasurer's report and the financial statements are all sent to the board. And then the board can send me questions or anything. And then we have the board meeting. And if there's still questions, they can ask those questions at the board meeting. So that's kind of what my
Lots of opportunity.
I know,
great.
yes, there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that, with the boards that I've served on, the great thing is people are really engaged if you speak English to them, that they understand, the finances. So we want to make it fun, David. It's got to be fun.
Wow, I like that. Making it fun.
It's got to be fun. Got to be fun.
I always try to. I think that's the important part of board volunteerism is having a good time while you do it.
Yes. Yes.
I think it's one of the vital tenets of being successful in your volunteers. So Gina, I'm going to go a little bit off script. This is not something we talked about. And as I'm looking at around the room, Pat has been in most of her career in the nonprofit sector, education and nonprofit. John has as well. I have as well. You, on the other hand, have a little different background, being in financial services all of your career, but also
Right.
serving in volunteerism as well. Maybe you can talk a little bit about if you see there's a challenge or a concern, someone coming from a for-profit or a non-nonprofit background serving as treasurer in a nonprofit. Are there any challenges that you experienced when you first came into your treasurer role that that made it more difficult for you because you were coming in from a for-profit mentality?
I think that yes, it was a learning curve
Okay.
because you kind of already understand a lot of these things. So to be able to come into an environment where you may have a treasurer who is just, okay, I mean, I was given this job, so I'm going to do this job. Okay. And then not saying that they don't know how to do the job. It's kind of like some of the things that John has actually said, just being able to communicate and collaborate if the person really doesn't understand what a statement of financial position is, or that the name had changed from statement of financial position from balance sheet. So being able to sort those things out and not being, I guess, condescending or arrogant, be able to walk through those things. And the other thing is too, it's all about training as well. So, if you have organizations like a Charity Strong who's having, some type of training, or even the association, being able to get people into the right place to bring you to where you are. Let's meet together and be able to collaborate. Because it's okay to say, I don't know something, because I'll be the first person to say, I don't know that. But let me call somebody and I'll get you the answer for that.
Great approach. Thank you. And thank you for that, Gena. That's a real insightful. And John, in your role, like in my role, where we meet with boards and audit committees and finance committees throughout our careers, we've come across treasurers who don't have a nonprofit background. So what maybe thoughts or comments might you have around how a nonprofit treasurer might acclimate themselves into the role of treasurer to achieve some level of success?
Yeah, what a great question, David. I think, again, if they have some business acumen, it will help them.
Right.
Because whether you call it a statement of financial position or a balance sheet, I think there's an element where the savvier business person will understand that it's about financial condition. It's about your assets minus your liabilities equal your equity or your net assets, and it's important to keep growing those. Don't mean to overly simplify the issue, right? But I'll share with you kind of an interesting habit that we had at the American Cancer Society on the audit committee, and in many cases the finance committees as well. We always invited a doctor to participate on those committees. Now you'd think a doctor, they're experts in other areas, but I'll tell you what, they had some of the most insightful comments, and it usually started with an apology. Hey, I don't really understand pension accounting, but could you just explain to me why this obligation is so much larger than the assets that you have set aside for the, and that sparks some great conversation, because if you have to reduce an issue down to its elements, oftentimes people just get a much deeper appreciation for it. So yeah, we as practitioners have varying degrees of expertise on the other side of the table. Oftentimes we serve in that translator role too. And the best boards have, I would say, a complement of people from diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences. And I think a good treasurer includes them, educates them, tries to make them feel valuable, and you would be surprised at the return on that investment. Oftentimes, it's always surprised me at some of the great contributions that non-accounting professionals made on a finance committee.
Great. And the role, I've worked with amazing treasurers over the years that were commercial folks and folks that were in private industry or own their own businesses, and were very successful in helping to navigate the organization through their treasurer role and responsibilities. Because I think, to your point, John, we have to bring it back down to its basics at times. And when you do that, it adds an element of understanding and knowledge that maybe gets lost with someone who has more experience, maybe in a nonprofit. So you can still be successful as a treasurer, even without a strong nonprofit background. That's the point I was trying to make with this. So great conversation here. Pat, in your role, how do you ensure, when you're the treasurer, transparency and accuracy in financial reporting? How do we do that as a volunteer when we're not in the weeds of the numbers? What are some of the things you do around that concept?
I guess that it doesn't make sense, piece
Okay.
to it. Reviewing the financial statements, did things make sense, and not being, I don't think I'm ever afraid, but not being concerned about bringing up to the CFO or whoever the person is that you're dealing with that, I have some questions, and, can we talk about it, and, maybe get some answers. And, occasionally nobody's perfect. It's a mistake. And other times it's a very, it's explained, makes sense. And, we go from there. But I think making sure that you've asked those questions, devote the time, and, try to get those reports ahead of time. That's an ongoing challenge at times to get the report. And I think that's, a lot of nonprofits have that, do you have enough time to look at them? And I think that one other thing, and I think it fits here, but it was based on some suggestions on, I think it was actually one of the NYCON board members. It was an opportunities threats kind of matrix that we developed to sort of highlight some of the issues. And through COVID on the ARC, it turned into more of a, unusual items list, I guess, so that, that number looks odd, but here's why, because, healthcare money came through, and, lots of that. And it's been a great, it was a little bit of, it was a little bit of extra work, but once we got it rolling, and I think the board has come to appreciate that. So, that they can, also jog your memory of what happened, and that there was a lot of complex funding coming through those organizations. Right. So I guess, that doesn't make sense. And if it's not making sense to me, or if I need more clarification, go back in and make sure that before we get to the board level, we've ironed out those details and have those explanations. Yeah.
The common sense approach, I think, is a wise strategy, and also having time to look at things before the meeting so that you are prepared, be able to come back to manage it with questions. Gena, in your role, are there any other financial data points that you utilize outside of, say, a balance sheet or a P&L or activity statement that you work with to help you ensure transparency and accuracy in financial reporting?
Well, having an annual audit is really important to be able to, for not only just you, but the staff, and then also, because we have an external auditor, and then also for the board. That's a requirement because we're in New York State, and then we're over $250,000. So everyone needs to look at their particular state to understand whether or not that is necessary, or there's some other reporting tool. I think that the software is a big for me, making sure that it's reliable. As you know, what goes in, garbage out. So you need to make sure that when you're looking at your financial statements that, the comparisons to budgets, to actuals, to year end, your forecast, all of those things need to be, looked at. As the treasurer, I can do that, but then also, the support of the finance committee, and then also the board ultimately, is looking, at this information. So I think that those are the things that I would say for me that are really important around transparency and making sure that, the work that we're getting and receiving is correct.
Excellent, great. And John, from your perspective, are there any other key financial reports that you're getting or giving out as to board members outside of the core couple of documents that help you to understand the financials or help others understand the financial picture?
Yeah, thanks for the question, David. I just wanted to take a step back and talk about the cadence of looking. I think
Sure.
That's really important. As a treasurer, you shouldn't just be waiting like a week before the board meeting or at the end of the year. Obviously, the more interaction that you have with an organization, especially an organization that may be in trouble, the more important that will be. So I agree with all of the tools that Pat and Gena mentioned before to help keep an eye on the ball, if you will. I think one key performance indicator that I really encourage my clients and the organizations I volunteer for is to look at a measure of liquidity, which is very, very simple. It's a static measure, but it's just simply calculating the number of months' expenses that you have in cash. And you got to be careful that that number doesn't dip below your historic means. We could talk about what that number of months you should have on hand for hours, but generally speaking, you sort of know what your optimal cash position is. And that's a position that, let's just say, could range from 6 to 15 months or so. And you should kind of have a good eye on what that is and how it trends to make sure that other things are falling into place, right? Are you collecting on your contributions receivables? Are you collecting on membership dues? Are you managing the liquidity correctly? Liquidity management is critical, right? You want to avoid being into a credit line. You want to avoid being into debt as much as you can, and managing liquidity is a very important tool. So no matter how you do it, whether you use that static measure of liquidity or others, it's important to keep an eye on liquidity in most organizations.
I would agree. I think also looking at cash flow is probably another really important thing to be looking at from a treasurer's role, which dovetails with liquidity. It's not necessarily a statement of cash flows you see in the annual financial statement, but more of the cash flow projections that go out 3, 6 to 12 months to really give you as a treasurer a sense of where the inflows and outflows are going to be, and where you're going to have some potential concerns around ability to make payroll, pay bills, if that is the type of situation you're in. But also, if you're looking to manage and grow reserves, a cash flow projection report is another tool that you can utilize to maybe put money away for a rainy day fund or something like that to help you help navigate that type of situation. So I think all good things to be looking at. And Gena, I think you raised the point earlier. It's about making sure ultimately that the board members understand, no matter what the reports are, that they understand what it means. Right. And you've used the term, make it simple or understand it. I think about the AICPA, who has the Center for Plain English, to help take accounting and numbers into more basic terms so people understand. I think that's where you were going with that concept, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. I think as John had said, with liquidity, we have as a part of the treasurer's report that we have the cash flow. We have a cash flow statement, but we also forecast out to know where we're going to be because we're on GAAP accounting. With 12 months, you're talking about membership dues and making sure that you kind of account for those things, along the way and be able to understand, because even with, waiting until your annual audit to look at your financial picture is not what you should do. You should be doing this, on a monthly basis. And to be able to engage the board is really important during that process.
That's a great point. I think it's important, while an organization may report to the board, say on a quarterly basis, the financial information, I think as the treasurer, it's incumbent on us not just to look at everything on a quarterly basis. Right. I guess it all depends also on the financial health of the organization, right, but being a resource to the executive leadership team, or even on a monthly basis, could be a true value to the organization. So that's something that treasurers should be thinking about as part of that role and responsibility. Pat, I want to turn my attention to strategy a little bit. As you know, and we've known each other a long time now, I'm a big believer on strategy and strategic vision in all roles of a board member, all officer roles and regular board member roles. What do you think about a strategic vision approach when it comes to the treasurer role? And have you had any experiences in working with either your nonprofits or in your consulting work in helping a treasurer be more strategic in his or her approach?
I think we've evolved into more of a strategic role. Talking with Gena was talking about cash flow projections and looking at down the road, especially coming out of COVID, it was even more important to look at where the organization's strategy is. You're hearing a lot about organizations now that use the money and didn't look ahead to say, this isn't replacing, it's not coming back again. So I think it's been a more gradual process, but definitely strategic, more of a vision. On the ARC side, they've been undertaking some major projects that have been vetted by staff and then proposed to the board. And I think looking at that and what it means to the strategy of the organization did have impact on kind of reining it back a bit and making it a bit more thoughtful, I guess, in terms of how to roll it out, what makes sense, and not getting ahead of yourself in as much as you love the idea, and it'll be a great thing when it all gets done. But do we have the resources? How can we plan that out and look at it in terms of the the vision? So I guess it's a long answer, but yes, I think it has been.
No,
And the money has to be there to be able to do those things, especially
it's great. It's great to be a yes person, Pat, but sometimes as treasurer, we got to be the no person, right? We have
you're
to.
not the most popular at times.
We got to reel them in. We got to reel in the CFO sometimes from our board roles. Say, whoa, are you sure we can handle that? Are you sure we're prepared? If we want to go down that strategic approach, do we have the resources to really execute that at its fullest in order to achieve success? So that's great points here.
Yeah, we ran also into discussions of conflicts of interest and where those, what they really are, and then, how they have to be disclosed and what some of the concerns are when you go down that route. So.
Great, thank you. John, how about from your perspective and from a strategic vision, role of treasurer, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, the treasurers that have impressed me the most in my career are those that are strategic thinkers, that aren't just historians, but also strategists, right? Looking forward. It's not just about reporting the numbers, right? It's about anticipating what's ahead. And I think that's particularly important now when, we see a changing demographic of donors in the nonprofit sector, a younger demographic that's seemingly more interested in understanding impact. They're not giving just based upon the fact that it's the American Cancer Society. No, they want to understand how their contribution is going to drive impact. And being able to understand that, being able to understand stakeholder expectations, not only today, but a few years down the road, is critical to a treasurer and, of course, the board. So to the extent that a treasurer can be strategic, it can help open a board's eyes to financial consequences ahead and opportunities ahead. So I think it's very, very important that that treasurers be strategic. That's why sometimes I think treasurers really need to ask themselves, if they're posting the debits and the credits, you can't be strategic that way. You really have to be careful about what your investment is in your finance operations in the charity. And believe me, I'm not naive. I get it. First of all, treasurers are hard to find. Volunteers are hard to find. Talented financial people are hard to find. It's not like they just come out of the sky. You make do with what you have, and people just find a way. But you just have to be careful sometimes that you're not stuck in the mud with getting the accounting records done every month, or trying to figure out some basics about your budgeting and your actual and budgeted results. So I think it's just important to kind of stay above that noise a little bit. It's not noise, it's just the basic blocking and tackling of a CFO, and be strategic. The more strategic, the better you're able to anticipate where the organization needs to go.
Great, thank you. Gena, have you had any strategic perspectives in your role in your current role as treasurer now? I'm sure you have, with 250 bosses.
Absolutely. I concur with John. Doing the debits and credits is not my thing. Okay.
Nope.
I let the staff actually do that. I like to say that I am a strategic thinker. I am thinking about down the road. We have, policies that we have, that there are requirements on things that we have to do. And one of them is, it's like a 5-year forecast, out on how and what the plan is. But a big part of that strategically is around your mission and what it is that you want to do. How are you going to keep these volunteers engaged? What does that mean? With today's time, it's about impact. It's not about, listen, what, my mother's going to give some money, and you know what, I don't have to worry about that. No, now the young people, the millennials, are giving their money and they want to see impact. So what does that mean strategically for an organization? That means that you have to have programs and initiatives that they are going to be interested in, that they are going to want to give their dollars to. So I like to think in working with the CEO and the board to be able to sit around the table and say, what's next? Where do we see ourselves 5 years down the road? Okay, guess what? We've got a reserve over here that is like 3 times what our policy is. So, okay, we're good with the funds right now, but guess what? This is a dues-driven organization. So you have to remember that the reason that they're members of this organization is because of what we do and because of our mission and how we drive that mission.
I agree completely. The treasurers that can think forward, can work in conjunction with the executive leadership team
Yes.
to develop and work through a strategic plan, which is a vital part, in my opinion, as well, of board governance. You're always looking ahead, and
Right.
you may not necessarily have the resources today, but a good treasurer is thinking about how can I have the resources down the line, and always keeping in mind mission and vision. I'm glad you finally said that, because we haven't really talked about mission and vision at all throughout the past
Yes.
hour. But everything is tied back to what the nonprofit's mission and vision is all about. And I think a treasurer has to ensure that mission creep going this way from a financial perspective has to be brought back in line, and it's all, I think it's all part of all the officers, but a treasurer has a really important role because they're the steward of the steward, holding the stewardship of the assets of the organization in their fiduciary responsibility. So we have about 5 minutes left. I can't believe how quickly an hour goes by.
Wow.
And think of all the things that we talked about, we were going to talk about today, right? But I do want to spend maybe a minute or two, each of you, talking about what advice you might give to a new treasurer. So, Gena, let's start with you. How could you impart, what kind of knowledge would you impart on a new treasurer who's coming into a nonprofit organization?
I think when you're coming into a new organization, you need to understand, what they have, meaning the financial systems, looking at what policies that they actually have in place, being able to understand the staff and then what the roles are, and how the board basically interacts, between, the board and then also the staff. But more so, I think that because they're changing times, there are a lot of new trends that are actually taking place now that we all as treasurers have to kind of keep in the back of our mind. AI is going to be a huge driver of where we go in the future, whether it's donors or just operational period. We are a virtual organization with people that are all over the United States, and our CEO is actually based in Memphis. So I think that taking all of those into account and looking at the trends and where we're going, being able to incorporate those into your new role is really key, and being able to talk to other people and be able to have, especially outside, to understand, what that role is about as well.
You raise a great point about technology, Gena, and AI and public AI and private AI and how all that technology plays a part in the financial resources of an organization, the financial acumen of a treasurer. And it's amazing how involved technology has become in financial statement reporting and analysis, and probably how little folks are educated around what all of it means. But I think coming back to the term continuous learning as a treasurer is also a really, really important aspect of board services. How a treasurer continues to learn more, not just about the organization they serve, but also about the technology around the organization that can help them be successful. John,
It's not just to add on to that. It's not a one-time job. It's not when you actually, as John referred to, 1 week before the board meeting. Being a treasurer, a good treasurer, is really in tune to what's going on in the world, and how that role is evolving is really, really important.
Great point. Thank you for that. John, how about from yourself? Any advice?
Yeah, hopefully you're inheriting a high functioning situation when you're a treasurer. And if you're lucky enough to do that, then I think it's incumbent upon you to understand the finance committee charter, understand the role of the treasurer,
But-
understand your board. Hopefully you've done a number of years on the board before you've assumed the role of treasurer. And understanding before what is it? Seek to understand before you seek to be understood, I think is very, very important. It can help you, it can help you in a well-established situation. In a broken situation where by necessity you've been tagged to be the treasurer, that's very challenging. And I think in that case, do not accept the behaviors of the past.
Right.
Bring your experiences, bring what you think needs to be done, and be persuasive. Sometimes you really, as a treasurer, need to stick your neck out and go against the tide and tell the board, don't agree with this. You can't keep doing this. And here's why. And we need to fix it and offer solutions to fix it. Don't let a bad situation get worse by not doing the things you think need to be done based upon your experience and knowledge. And I would say ultimately, as a treasurer, don't forget the old Wayne Gretzky tactic, right? He went to where he thought the puck was heading, not to where it was, right? And I think it's very important to be strategic, be forward-looking, don't get mired in the day-to-day debits and credits. And I think those are elements of a successful treasurer.
Wonderful, thank you. And Pat, you have the last 60 seconds.
Yeah, not
So
too much.
there's no pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, I totally agree with with what you said there. I think keeping learning as much as you can, realizing that you don't know everything either as the treasurer, and asking questions about those items that you don't know. Also, just being comfortable making suggestions, because everybody here has had experiences in other places that might fit, or at least be worth considering. So share the knowledge that you have. So I guess those are the. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Pat. I would say also, don't be afraid of conflict. To John's point, sometimes we have to step into that role to change the tide or to steer the ship in a different direction and to bring things back to center again. Ultimately, because mission and vision is what's most paramount, impact is paramount, and stewardship of assets is most paramount. And treasurers have lots of responsibilities. We did not mean to scare anybody in the treasurer role today, but really to educate, inform, and help folks understand that it's more than just the debits and credits. There's more to just being a treasurer than getting a report and talking about it at a board meeting. I hope everyone has found information we've shared today useful. And Barbara, I'm going to pass it back to you in our last probably 30 seconds or so.
Thank you so much, David. This has been just a delight, you all. I really appreciate your taking the time, and I appreciate the people who are watching taking the time as well. I hope all of you who are joining us will take an opportunity to go visit our website. We've been doing these roundtables now for several years. We have information from chairs, conversations among millennials, conversations about dealing with difficult board members. All of these resources are available to you for free. And thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.